Our first guest believes tax hikes will remain off the table. Joining us from Washington is Mattie Corrao, the government affairs manager with Americans for Tax Reform. Mattie, I get the sense that without some form of a tax hike, the Dems will allow August 2nd to arrive without a deal to raise the ceiling. You with me on that one?
I don't think we're going to see any tax hikes coming down the pipe in the form of a debt limit increase, simply because just as early as this last week, we had Democrats talking about defense spending being the concession they wanted to see from Republicans. And as we've seen from these Democrats in Congress and in the White House, if you have them talking about spending, that means taxpayers have already won the battle on the debt limit because they've gotten away from the tax increase. They've gotten away from the distraction of what is essentially and will continue to be a spending problem until both parties get serious about the fact that the government spending money it doesn't have.
Are you seeing this August 2nd deadline as being a political deadline, and maybe both sides actually feel like it won't be a catastrophic event? The Republicans saying, hey, the Democrats are going to come to the table with a deal here, and then the Democrats are saying, you know what? Go ahead. If it is catastrophic, it's on the Republicans, it's on the backs of the Republicans, and if it isn't, then we can somehow move forward.
Right, and I think it's interesting that we hear some murmurings about wanting a deal now by July 22nd for whatever reason that date was picked, because the White House is an expert at trying to use the rhetoric of exigency, trying to push an emergency. We saw this with the government shutdown language back in the spring when we were talking about government funding. And the same thing will probably continue with the White House trying to push a deal down the throats of Republicans that isn't appetizing to fiscal conservatives, taxpayers, or voters. And you'll see Republicans standing strong saying, we're not going to cave on tax increases. What we need is spending cuts, and we need serious reform now.
Mattie, I really get the sense that we're going to get to August 2nd without a deal. Now, the president did announce, as we're seeing him on the screen, this was just a couple of hours ago, that he will meet with both the Republicans and Democrats from both the House and the Senate on Thursday. You think that's posturing, or you think we might actually get something done by the end of the day on Thursday?
Well, listen, Republicans have been very clear as to what they're willing to accept and what they're not willing to accept. It's now up to the White House and congressional Democrats to get serious about fixing the government spending problem. And as long as they continue to be distracted by tax breaks, taxes and increased revenue, this is something that's we're not going to have an accomplished debt limit increase. The fact, though, that the president keeps coming forward and making nods to tax revenue, but not really saying anything serious, blaming the whole problem on corporate jet tax deductions and that sort of thing, gives you a hint that the president isn't really serious about raising revenue, and he does want a deal to come down the pipe. But that means that he has to come to terms with his overblown spending problem and make some steps to fix it.
Mattie, you think the Republicans really are unified at this point? Because we have Cornyn and some of the others over the weekend saying, we'd take a mini deal, we'd take a short-term deal if it got us going in the right direction. But yet Senator Paul today and some others have said no short-term deal at all. That's just kicking the can down the road, even though he said, I hate using that expression. But, I mean, do you get a feeling that the Republicans maybe aren't as unified as some might think?
Well, I think the interesting thing here is to look ahead and see what you can get out of a short-term deal. And the thing that I like about a short-term deal is it keeps the president coming back to the table. So he can't get his, $2.5 trillion worth of leash, getting him past the next election, and then do whatever he wants to get elected again. So if you give him a short-term deal, you have to keep him congenial. You have to keep him talking to Republicans, and he has to keep his promise on spending cuts that Republicans say they won't accept a deal that are contingent upon.
That's going to be very interesting. We'll see what happens on Thursday. Thank you, Mattie Corrao.
Yeah, thank you.